So the problem with having a YouTube channel about movies, specifically about leading up to franchise movies, is that when you see a trailer for an original movie that is not a sequel to anything, you kind of have to think, how can I make content for this? So when I saw the trailer for Old, I thought to myself, I'm going to have to do a video on an M. Night Shyamalan movie. And it turns out the only M. Night Shyamalan movie that I have on DVD is Signs. So we're going to talk about Signs. Now, before people yell at me, I will say I do have The Sixth Sense on VHS. But I feel like people have talked about that movie enough. So we're going to talk about Signs. So I remember when I first saw Signs. I don't remember it coming out. I don't remember seeing it in the theaters. I just remember the first time that I saw it. And, you know, this is one of those movies that, do you call it a horror movie? Is it actually scary? Blah, 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 blah. I was significantly younger when I saw it. I think it was 2002 when this movie came out. So I would have been 12? 11 or 12? So I thought this movie was pretty good on the rewatch. I still think the movie is pretty good. You know, I've got mixed feelings about Mel Gibson right now, and I've never really been a fan of Joaquin Phoenix, but I think they both play their parts well. I don't know if I ever realized before that the son is Macaulay Culkin's brother. I don't know if I just didn't notice the similarity or if I just assumed it was him when I was younger because I didn't realize how different they were. But yeah, Macaulay Culkin's brother is in this. And I didn't realize at the time that M. Night Shyamalan is in his own movies frequently. So he's also in this movie. But it's just a pretty decent movie about a family. It's in some ways it's pretty similar to A Quiet Place because you've got presumably an alien invasion, and you focus on one family and how they deal with it. This one, crop circles was the big thing. Man, you remember when crop circles were a thing? That was I don't know. Crop circles are one of those things where people that don't know what they're talking about, not that I do, but people that don't know what they're talking about are like, oh, it's so precise. There's no way people could have done this. It's so precise. It's so exact. And then people that do know what they're talking about are like, and they say it in the movie even, they're like, yeah, like 2 or 3 guys could do this in a couple hours with ropes and boards. Like, it's not that complicated. So I haven't looked it up because why would I want to be accurate when I can just randomly speculate? I don't remember if there were actually a resurgence in crop circles around the time of this movie. That's what I have in my head. But what probably happened was I became interested in crop circles around the time of this movie. And so looked up and then saw old reports of when they had happened decades ago, which they also talk about in this movie. And my memory is mistakenly thinking that those reports that I read at the time were from the time, which I don't think is the case. Anyways, don't have a lot to say about it. Oh, the one nitpick that I feel like I've heard a lot of people talk about is that, well, a lot of people think that it's dumb that they're, you know, allergic or whatever to water. And it's like, why would they come to a planet mostly covered in water if they can't handle water? There are real-life examples of armies going into battle in geographical locations that were not prepared to deal with the ramifications of those geographical locations. So, I understand that they're aliens, and we assume that that means that they've got higher intelligence because they're capable of space travel, but the idea that someone can go to a territory and be negatively affected by natural resources in that territory that they were not prepared for, that happens in real life. So I'm totally on board with that happening in a science fiction movie. But the thing that I remember people really nitpicking was all the glasses of water everywhere. And like, that wouldn't really happen, blah, 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 blah. If you've ever lived in a house with a young child, that absolutely happens. And there's a scene where he's like, what's wrong with this? It's got dust in it. What's wrong with this? It's got a hair. At one point she says, it tastes old. Kids absolutely do that. I've got 6 siblings, okay? If you think that's unrealistic, I would not be surprised at all if the whole concept of this movie came from the fact that M. Night Shyamalan had kids that left glasses of water out everywhere, and he was like, how can I turn this into a movie? Because that is absolutely real. That absolutely happens. But apparently he said he just wanted to make an alien invasion movie focusing on one family, which, like I said, is kind of what A Quiet Place is. It's just that the aliens are different. The aliens, speaking of the aliens, for the most part, I think they still hold up. There's like one scene when he's holding, I can't remember the son's name, Morgan? Because I got confused. Because for a while I thought the son's name was the daughter's name. Because it's an ambiguous name. I think the son's name is Morgan. Something like that. But the scene where the alien is holding him, and you get more close-up shots, and it's more during the light, it's not great. But I think for the most part, because they kept him in the shadows, and they kept him in the dark, and it was very quick, I think most of it still works. And if I hadn't known all of the moments, like the leg going into the corn, and the birthday video from Brazil where it walks across, like if I hadn't known all of those things, because I've seen this movie before, I feel like someone that watches this movie now for the first time would still kind of be like, would still kind of jump at those moments like I did. And there's one moment when they're in the basement and they kind of remember that there's a coal chute, which, like, I feel like you'd know that, but it doesn't seem like they use their basement very much, so okay, maybe that's fine. But there's a scene where they're trying to find this coal chute, and then they find it, and Morgan is standing there in front of it, and it shows him. It cuts back to them, and they've got kind of concerned faces, and then it cuts back to him, and he's like, what? And then you notice that there's a hand coming through this grate that reaches out and grabs him. And I had to pause it and rewind, because I was like, was the hand there in the first shot? And is that what they're reacting to? And I just didn't notice? Or did they cheat and they didn't put the hand there? And so maybe they're just like confused in their reaction shot, and then the hand's there in the next shot. But I rewound it and I checked, and the hand's there the whole time. It's just very hard to notice. I think it's very well done. Reminds me a lot of, I can't remember which Rambo movie it is. I want to say 2, where he like hides in the forest, and there's like the bit where he's in the mud, and the bit where he's on top of the tree, and the bit where he's in the brush, and the bit where he's in the river. Maybe I'm mixing 2 and 3. Maybe these are 2 different things. Anyway, anytime I get to that scene or those scenes in the Rambo movie or movies that they are in, I always have to like go back and see, and I'm like, yeah, he was there before, and I just didn't see it. Like, it's good camouflage. So yeah, I think, and you know, I read a bit that Night Shyamalan doesn't like to use, or at least at the time didn't like to use, a lot of effects. So a lot of stuff still holds up because a lot of it was done practically. It was anytime, maybe not anytime, but I feel like a lot of times when you have a smaller movie like this with a narrower focus, there are things in the movie that's just like, why is that there? And a lot of the stuff with the female police officer kind of stuck out to me on this watch. So when she first comes to the house, Mel Gibson makes a comment about how it took her 2 hours to get there. And she just starts telling him about this lady that went into some store and started spitting on all the skateboards because she was mad at kids skateboarding. And she's like, she must have had a cold, blah, 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 blah. I don't think I'll eat for a week. And it's just nothing. Like, it doesn't come back to play later. It's not a character that we ever see or hear of again. So it's just small town gossip from a police officer, which is just weird. And like, the movie's not super short, so it's not like they needed to add an extra I don't know. It might have been to like highlight that he knows her and that they've got, you know, a relationship or whatever. But I don't think you need that. And then I feel like there was another. Oh, the bit where she's talking to them about what they saw and she's like, so far it was very dark, and she's trying to get a description of who it was, and they're like, well, we didn't see who it was, and they presumed that it was a male, and she's like, well, it could have been a female. Have you seen the females in the Olympics and the Scandinavian females and blah blah blah, and it's just like, what's the point of that? Like, I get that as a police officer, based on what they've said, you're not only going to look for men, but going into Olympics and Scandinavia, and then Joaquin Phoenix's character even has a line later where he's like, assuming that it wasn't a Scandinavian Olympic level female athlete or something like that, what are our other possibilities? And then she kind of like does a jab at him for it. She's like, I don't appreciate sarcasm. And it's just like, but you realize how strange that sounds, right? And you could make the same point of, if you didn't see him, you don't know who it is. Get over yourself. You're not as fast as you think you are. But just going into the Olympics and the Scandinavians, and I did read that either some of the aliens or originally the aliens were going to be modeled and performed by women. So maybe it was something that was going to come back later, but then they changed it because M. Night Shyamalan didn't like the look of it. So maybe the payoff to that setup was cut out at a later point. So maybe it was supposed to go somewhere, but in the final movie, it doesn't. And so there's just a couple little things like that I'm like, why is this in here? I don't understand. But those little teeny tiny things aside, and they're not bad. It's just confusing as to why it's in there. But other than that, I think 2002, almost 20 years old. I think it still pretty well holds up. I haven't seen a ton of M. Night Shyamalan movies. I guess, I don't know. I've seen the Unbreakable trilogy. I've seen The Sixth Sense. I have not seen Lady in the Water. I almost bought that to watch for this video, but I couldn't find a copy cheap enough because I don't know anything about it, and I'm kind of hit and miss on M. Night Shyamalan, so I was like, I don't want to spend a bunch of money on a movie that I don't really have any interest in watching that has nothing to do with this other movie. So I was like, what do I already have? And it was Signs. So I went with Signs. So I haven't seen Lady in the Water. I haven't seen The Happening. Haven't seen The Last Airbender. And I don't remember all of them, but The Village is still to this day my most disappointing movie experience at the movie theater. Or even not at the movie theater, just biggest disappointment in terms of what the movie told me it was and what it actually was. So definitely did not want to watch The Village, which I don't own. But I looked into buying The Sixth Sense on DVD to maybe do that for this. And, I try to buy the cheapest copy I can because I buy a lot of movies. And so there were a lot of multi-packs with The Sixth Sense and The Village. And I was like, ugh, I don't even want to look at this. I don't even want to think about this because... And I have never rewatched it since the movie theater. And it's probably not as bad as I think. It's just that it wasn't the movie that the trailers told me it would be. And I've kind of mentioned in other videos that I am very much... My enjoyment of a film is very much based on my expectation. And if that expectation comes from the movie itself, in terms of trailers and things like that, and then it goes against that, it makes me upset. So, that's why we're talking about Signs. Because M. Night Shyamalan's got a new movie. This is the only M. Night Shyamalan one that I've got. And I like it pretty well. So it was nice to have an excuse to rewatch it. So there you go. Those are my thoughts on Signs. You can let me know your thoughts on Signs, or should I check out Lady in the Water? I have no idea what it's about. I don't know if people thought it was good or not. So maybe I need an excuse to pick that up. If we get another M. Night Shyamalan movie in the next couple of years, that'll probably be my go-to. But those are my thoughts. Thank you for watching, and have a good day.